Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's wrap up week 36 with Second Age Saturday. Now, this series we've been reading about the adventures of Aldarion from Unfinished Tales. Erendis will come along eventually, I promise. Now, we ended with Aldarion going out on a couple of very long sea voyages on the Numenor, the ship given to him by his grandfather Veantur. But we had a hint or two that not all things were well with his family as a result, and that is where we're going to go ahead and pick up. Now, last time he sailed on those 2 long journeys, and we observed that between the ages of 25 and 39, he spent more than 9 years of that time on the sea. And that's where we pick up. In the 39th year of his age, Aldarion returned to Numenor, bringing gifts from Gil-galad to his father. For in the following year, as he had long proclaimed, Tar-Meneldur relinquished the scepter to his son, and Tar-Meneldur became the king. Then Aldarion restrained his desire, and remained at home for a while for the comfort of his father. And in those days he put to use the knowledge he had gained of Círdan concerning the making of ships, devising much anew of his own thought. And he began also to set men to the improvement of the havens and the quays, for he was ever eager to build greater vessels. But the sea-longing came upon him anew, and he departed again, and yet again from Numenor, and his mind turned now to ventures that might not be compassed with one vessel's company. Therefore he formed the Guild of Venturers, that afterwards was renowned. To that brotherhood were joined all the hardiest and most eager mariners, and young men sought admission to it even from the inland regions of Numenor, and Aldarion they called the Great Captain. At that time he, having no mind to live upon land in Tar-Meneldur, had a ship built that should serve as his dwelling place. He named it therefore Eambar, and at times he would sail in it from haven to haven of Numenor. But for the most part it lay at anchor off Tol Uinen, and that was a little isle in the Bay of Ramenna that was set there by Uinen, the Lady of the Seas. Upon Eambar was the guild house of the Venturers, and there were kept the records of their great voyages. For Tar-Meneldur looked coldly on the enterprises of his son, and cared not to hear the tale of his journeys, believing that he sowed the seeds of restlessness and the desire of other lands to hold. In that time, Aldarion became estranged from his father, and ceased to speak openly of his designs and his desires. But Almarion, the queen, supported her son in all that he did, and Meneldur perforce let matters go as they must. For the venturers grew in numbers and in the esteem of men, and they called them the Uinendili, the lovers of Uinen, and their captain became the less easy to rebuke or restrain. The ships of the Numenorians became ever larger and of greater draught in those days, until they could make far voyages, carrying many men and great cargoes, and Aldarion was often long gone from Numenor. Tar-Meneldur ever opposed his son, and he set a curb on the felling of trees in Numenor for the building of vessels. And it came therefore into Aldarion's mind that he would find timber in Middle-earth, and seek there for a haven for the repair of his ships. In his voyages down the coasts, he looked with wonder on the great forests, and at the mouth of the river that the Numenorians called Gwathir, that's the Gwathlo or the Grey Flood, River of Shadow, he established Vignalonde, the new haven. But when nigh on 800 years had passed since the beginning of the Second Age, Tar-Meneldur commanded his son to remain now in Numenor and to cease for a time his eastward voyaging, for he desired to proclaim Aldarion the king's heir, as had been done at that age of the heir by the kings before him. Then Meneldur and his son were reconciled for that time, and there was peace between them. And amid joy and feasting, Aldarion was proclaimed heir in the 100th year of his age, and received from his father the title and power of Lord of the Ships and Havens of Numenor. To the feasting in Tar-Meneldur came one Beregar from his dwelling in the west of the isle, and with him came Erendis, his daughter. There Almarion the queen observed her beauty, of a kind seldom seen in Numenor, for Beregar came of the house of Beor by ancient descent, though not of the royal line of Elros, and Erendis was dark-haired and of slender grace, with the clear grey eyes of her kin. But Erendis looked upon Aldarion as he rode by, and for his beauty and splendor of bearing, she had eyes for little else. Thereafter, Erendis entered the household of the queen, and found favor also with the king. But little did she see of Aldarion, who busied himself in the tending of the forests, being concerned that in days to come timber should not lack in Numenor. Ere long, the mariners of the Guild of Venturers became restless, for they were ill content to voyage more briefly and more rarely under lesser commanders. And when 6 years had passed since the proclamation of the king's heir, Aldarion determined to sail again to Middle-earth. I love the mention here of Tol Uinen, an island said to have been placed there by Uinen herself, the Maya spirit and wife of Osse. Now, as the footnote to this bit tells us, the Númenóreans lived long in her protection and held her in reverence equal to the Valar. So, he goes on and becomes the great captain, founding the Guild of Venturers and building this massive houseboat. Land has nothing for this guy. Now, the name of the houseboat is Eambar, and here is your word nerdery for the day. It means sea dwelling. It's made up of Ear, meaning sea, as in Earendil, sea friend, and Mbar, meaning home. Now, we just saw this in the Oath of Elendil on the PPP, when Aragorn says, or when Elendil says, Sino me maruvar ar Hildinjar, he's saying, in this place will I abide, and my heirs. That M-A-R, maruvar, is abide. Now, finally, there's that line about Erendis' beauty, dark-haired and of slender grace, with the clear gray eyes of her kin. Now, if we go to the Silmarillion, where we read descriptions of the physical characteristics of the three different houses of the Edain, this is in chapter 17 of the Coming of Men into the West, we read that the men of that house, speaking of the house of Beor, were dark or brown of hair, with gray eyes, and of all men they were most like to the Noldor, and most loved by them, for they were eager of mind, cunning-handed, swift in understanding, long in memory, and they were moved sooner to pity than to laughter. Now, interestingly, Erendis is actually descended from Beleth, the sister of Baragund and Belegund. Beleth, then, is an aunt to both Morwen Edelwen, the wife of Hurin and the mother of Turin Turambar, and to Rian, wife of Huor, mother of Tuor. Well, folks, for now, that does it for this week's Second Age Saturday. Thank you for joining me, and please come back next week as Aldarion goes away on yet another long journey while Erendis pines in solitude. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join the Content Council, get bonus episodes, a whole lot more. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill by now, like and subscribe. And please, on a podcast app, follow or subscribe, and everybody follow @TolkienTimes on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.